Good to see you here at the very first lesson from the book, English for Writing Business Emails. I'm Brian Stewart, and in this first video lesson, we're going to go over the basic format for a professional business email. We'll be covering some pretty basic parts of an email, so if you're already familiar with this information, go ahead and skip ahead or just skim through the book to see if there's anything you want to review. Okay, so in order to talk about the basic format of a business email, what I'd like to do is go over a sample email that I received from a student in one of my workshops a few years ago. The background for this email is that the student went to another country to visit a business colleague that he just met. He returned to his home country from that visit, and now he wants to write an email to express his thanks to his business colleague for the hospitality that he received, and he also wants to express a desire to create a strong business relationship. Let's take a look at how he wrote the email, noting any mistakes that were made, and also how was it formatted? What does this email look like, and can it be improved? The email that we will go over together is on page 2 of the book, English for Writing Business Emails. Now, if you don't have the book yet, please send me an email. My email address is down below underneath in the video description underneath this video. Go ahead and send me an email, and I'd be happy to send a book out to you. The email that we are going to go over is on page 2, and I've pretty much reproduced it the way that I received it in the workshop that I referred to. So what I'd like to suggest that you do is to read this sample email and underline or mark anything that you think seems odd or that should be changed. So go ahead and pause this video at any time right now, read the email, mark anything that you think should be changed, and then come on back. Okay, I hope that you had some time to go over the email and mark or think about what are some mistakes or what are some things that should be changed. And we'll go over these together. But before we get into the details of the email, what I'd like to do is just together very quickly go over what should an email look like? What should a business email look like? On page 3, you can see 3 different emails, and I've reproduced them here on this slide as well. We have email 1, email 2, and email 3. Now, I never get emails that really look like email 1. This is just one big block of text. This is terrible, obviously. Nobody wants to read that. So hopefully your emails do not look like that. I do notice that sometimes, not often, but sometimes I do get emails that look like email number 2. And that's basically a line, then a break, a line, break, line, break. Now this looks very unprofessional. It looks like maybe a middle school or elementary school student wrote this. This is not very appropriate format. Obviously, you want your emails to look like email 3. You have your information in paragraphs, and you have clear spacing between the paragraphs so that the reader can easily notice what your main ideas are, and they can follow your train of thought very easily. So your email should look like email 3. Does the email on page 2 look like the email on page email 3 on page 3? No, it does not. It looks like the writer wrote a sentence, had a line break, and there's no space. So another sentence, line break, no space. So it's kind of a mixture between email 1 and email 2. Sure, there are breaks after each sentence, but there are no spaces between the sentences. This is not good. So we would need to rewrite this email to make it look more like email 3 on page 3. Now, as we go over the email, the details and the vocabulary and expressions used in the email, I've made it easy for you. If you have the book, the numbers correspond to the issues or the items in the email on page 2 that I think should be changed, and underneath I gave you space to write down your comments or your notes as we go over them together, and that will be on page 4 for your convenience. Okay, so let's take a look at the email in question. It starts off with, "Good morning, comma, Mr. George Lim." Is this correct for an email? No, it's not. Some students will comment that good morning is not appropriate for an email, and that's true in most cases. What should you use instead? We should be using dear Mr. George Lim. However, sometimes good morning could be appropriate. I had a participant in one of my workshops. He had a good idea. His home office, of course he works in Seoul, Korea, and his home office or his home company, parent company, was located in Germany. So when he got to the office in the morning, what he would do is write emails to his colleagues in Germany, and he would start each email with good morning, because he knew in about 4 or 5 hours they would be waking up, going to the office, and seeing his emails probably right away. So of course that's appropriate in that situation, but that's a specific, special type of situation. Normally, of course, we would just write dear, and do not put the comma after dear or good morning. The comma goes over here. So what I would suggest is this: Dear Mr. Lim, comma, or Dear Mr. George Lim, and use what we call a colon. Now, what is the difference between them? Dear Mr. Lim is probably the most common way to address or start your email, and I would recommend that in this case. I did want to point this out though. If you use somebody's full name and a colon, that is for a very formal email. If you're writing to somebody who's very important, maybe to the CEO of another company, or you're inviting a very honored or recognized speaker to speak at your conference, you might use the second illustration here, the second example, using the full name with a colon. We'll talk about that more later on when we talk about salutations. Okay, so I would recommend Dear Mr. Lim. Then we have the first sentence here. This is Randall Kim from YNCC. I would not recommend using this is, because this is not appropriate language for an email. This is what you would use on a telephone conversation when you're introducing yourself. For example, somebody calls and says, may I speak to Randall Kim, please? And then you would answer, yes, this is Randall Kim. How can I help you? But for an email, you wouldn't write this to introduce yourself. This is Randall Kim from YNCC. This seems very awkward. We don't use this expression. Instead, we would say, my name is Randall Kim, comma, and I am from YNCC. Of course, there's many ways to do this, but this is one of the more natural ways. This sounds much more natural than saying, this is Randall Kim. Also, be careful. Many of my students will write this. My name is Randall Kim, who works at YNCC. This sounds a little awkward. This construction here, saying your name, who works at, it sounds a little awkward in English. It almost sounds like this is your full name. My name is Randall Kim, who works at YNCC. It sounds a little strange to do it this way. However, what I would suggest is it really necessary to introduce yourself at the beginning of an email? Probably not. Think about this situation. He has returned to his home country from visiting Mr. Lim. Mr. Lim already knows who he is. And if Mr. Lim is curious about his name, he can just look at the bottom of the email very quickly and see his name typed out there along with his title and his company name. So that information is at the bottom of the email. It's not really necessary. And in fact, I would like to impress upon you that when you write an email, especially in English, you're probably writing to Western audiences. It's important to state the reason why you are writing at the very beginning of your email. Now understand there are cultural differences. In certain countries, it's important to express how do you know somebody, or maybe to introduce yourself, to get maybe a closer feeling, especially if you're writing to someone you don't know very well. However, in Western cultures, it's not important to do this, and don't feel as if you are being rude if you get straight to the point or right down to business immediately. Most Western audiences appreciate someone who does this. They feel like it might be wasting their time to read a lot of background information about who this person is, what their company does, when the company was founded. They don't want to read through all that information. They want to know right away, why are you writing? Why am I reading this email? What is the point of this email? So start with that. And that's what I've done here. So I would suggest, Dear Mr. Lim, I am writing to, and then express what the reason is for your communication. So, dear Miss Lim, I am writing to. And then we have the rest of the sentence, appreciate you for the hospitality you extended on my recent visit to your country last week. And you will notice that I've highlighted in red, appreciate you and your, because those are the mistakes in this sentence. We do not write, I am writing to appreciate you. That is an incorrect expression. Instead, a much more natural expression would be, I am writing to express my appreciation for. So if you are writing to someone to thank them for something they did and you want to express your appreciation, say, I am writing to express my appreciation, not I am writing to appreciate you, which is very strange. It sounds a little bit weird and maybe a little bit too personal, actually, if you write, I am writing to appreciate you. I appreciate you. It sounds too personal for a business email. Instead, I am writing to express my appreciation for what you did. In this case, for the hospitality you extended, not the hospitality you're extended. Actually, this is kind of a common mistake that even native speakers of English will make because people mistype very often. Be careful when you type you or your that you didn't mean you instead. So that's a kind of a common typing mistake. So be careful of that. I'm writing to express my appreciation for the hospitality you extended. Now, when we talk about hospitality, hospitality, of course, is the services or the generosity that you show to a visitor, whether it's to your home, to your office, to your country, whatever. And you extend hospitality to someone. So the hospitality you extended, that's a good verb to use with hospitality, the noun hospitality. So we should change the sentence this way. And then, of course, we should bring the next sentence up so that's all one paragraph. The paragraph has two sentences. And the memorable meeting at your office brought to mind again the close relationship between our two companies. There's no problem with that sentence. And I was kind of impressed with this sentence in the original email. I thought, wow, this is a good sentence because it helps bring a closer relationship between the writer and the reader. The writer is expressing very well the desire to maintain a close relationship between the two companies. Maybe the two companies have had a long relationship and the reader has just taken over a new job or just joined the company and has gone to meet his business colleague at the other company. That's what I kind of read between the lines when I read this. Okay, moving on. We have the next sentence. We expect to develop that relationship to the mutual benefit of our organizations. Here I highlighted expect. In Korean, expect is sometimes translated as gidehada. Now, gidehada in Korean has a positive feeling to it. It has a positive nuance. But expect in English does not have a positive nuance to it. If you say we expect to develop that relationship, that could sound a little bit cold or even aggressive. Let me give you another example. Let's say you're going to a conference next week. I'm going to the same conference. And I write to you and say, oh, I expect to see you at the conference next week. If you receive that, you might be thinking, you expect to see me? Why? Is there something important that you need to talk to me about? Did I make a mistake? Why are you expecting to see me? Am I in trouble? You know, all these kinds of thoughts could run through somebody's mind if they receive that type of sentence. So expect, don't use expect in this case. Of course, we could use look forward to. Look forward to has a much more positive or friendly nuance to it. We look forward to meeting you. We look forward to developing that relationship. Of course, when you use look forward to and you use a verb after it, the verb should be ing form. We look forward to developing that relationship. We look forward to meeting you at the conference next week. So look forward to is usually a better substitute for expect. Use expect if you make a prediction or you want somebody, you're expecting somebody to do something. But remember, it can seem cold or aggressive. So in most cases, it's probably better to use we look forward to. So in this case, we look forward to developing that relationship to the mutual benefit of our organizations. And mutual, of course, means it's good for both parties or both persons, both organizations involved. It's a mutual benefit. You win, I win. Win-win. It's a mutual benefit. Okay. Next we have, I will be great pleasure if we can keep contacting and meet up in Seoul, Singapore, or any conferences. So here we see a couple of problems. First of all, we see, I will be great pleasure. This is not correct. In this case, the reader wants to express that he would be pleased if he could keep meeting the reader. But the expression, I will be great pleasure, it doesn't really make sense. I will be great pleasure? What does that mean? It's nonsense. We need to change that to, it would give me great pleasure. Now that is a common expression that you could use if you want to express that you would appreciate or be happy about the reader's actions. It would give me great pleasure if you could send me the file tomorrow. Or it would give me, in this case, it would give me great pleasure if we can keep contacting, if we can keep meeting, stay in touch at different conferences. So it would give me great pleasure is a better expression to use. We'll go over more expressions like this in later units in the book. Now also we have, if we can keep contacting and meet up in Seoul. It sounds a little strange here. I highlighted a couple of different things. Well, the whole sentence really. We can keep contacting and meet up in Seoul, Singapore, or any conferences. There are a few issues here that I need to discuss. First of all, I would change keep contacting to if we could stay in touch. It would give me great pleasure if we could stay in touch. And meet. I changed meet from meet up. Meet up sounds too casual. It's like what you would say to your bro or your buddy. Hey, let's meet up this weekend, right? But you wouldn't say that to a business partner. Hey, you want to meet up this weekend? It's too casual, especially for this type of situation where it's a little bit more of a formal email. Just use meet. If we could stay in touch and meet regularly at conferences in Seoul, Singapore, or other venues. The reason I changed the ending there, let's go back to the previous one. It said meet up in Seoul, Singapore, or any conferences. The problem is Seoul and Singapore are not conferences. They're places. They are venues. A venue is a location for an event. So we need to rewrite the sentence a little bit. So it would give me great pleasure if we could stay in touch and meet regularly at conferences in Seoul, Singapore, or other venues, because yes, Seoul and Singapore are locations for events. They are venues. Now the sentence makes more sense and it's written more naturally. Next we have, also please notice me if you have a plan to attend the IFA show next month in Berlin. There are two issues with this sentence. Here we have notice and have a plan. Now notice is obviously incorrect. Many of my students will use notice instead of inform, notify, or tell. Please note that notice does not mean to inform someone of something or to tell someone some information. I'll talk about this in more detail in the next unit, Unit 2, when we go over common mistakes. So notice is not the correct vocabulary to use here. It should be please inform me or please notify me. Now the second one, have a plan, it's not technically incorrect, it's fine in English, but it does sound odd or awkward to a native speaker. We don't usually say, do you have a plan to attend the IFA show? Normally we would use it this way. We would say, do you plan to? So not have a plan. If you plan to attend the IFA show, or if you have plans to attend. So normally we use plan as a verb, or we use it in the plural, especially for more casual situations like this. Again, I will go into more detail in Unit 2. So I would change it to, also, please notify or inform me if you plan to attend the IFA show next month in Berlin. This sounds much more natural. And then I'll leave my contacts as below. That's fine. I did change it though. I changed it to please note my contact information below. That sounds a little bit more formal, sounds a little more professional. Of course, I leave my contacts as below. That's really not a problem. It's okay. I didn't, sometimes I highlight things. Maybe I'm a little picky, but I prefer this one. Please note my contact information below. Now you'll also notice that in the original, this is very poor organization. It's very difficult to separate the bits of information here. So of course, use a table when it is appropriate, and especially after a colon, which again we'll talk about later on in Unit 2. Okay, so that's kind of a wrap up. Those are the mistakes that I found in this email. Now, as usual, whenever I go over a student email and I go over it with them in a workshop, I also give them an example of how I would rewrite the email if I was in the writer's shoes. And you can see an example of that on page 6. It looks a little bit longer, the text is a little bit larger, but this is, if I was in that situation, how would I rewrite the email? And I rewrote it here. It takes, this rewrite incorporates many of the changes that I discussed just now, but it might have a few different ideas for you. And you notice that I've also added a paragraph down here, so I changed things around a little bit. But this is what I would write if I was in Randall Kim's shoes. So how is this email organized? Also, you can see on the opposite page from the suggested rewrite, I broke the email down into the various parts, and we can go over those together. So let's do that. At the very first one, of course, you have the two line over here. I don't really need to explain anything about that. That's obvious, and usually it's already filled in for you. It's the email address of the person to whom you're sending the email. However, one note I would like to make here, make sure your email address is a professional email address. Don't use something like hotguy2008 or cutegirl 2010. Of course, most of my participants in my workshops, they don't do this, but it is interesting. A few years ago in my presentation class, I did have a student, her presentation was about inappropriate email addresses used for the business place. I thought, yeah, that's, you know, I don't see it very often nowadays, but be careful. Just make sure that your email address is professional. Now, the next couple of things I should explain, because not everybody understands what these are, and sometimes I do get questions in my workshop. The first item is CC, and sometimes students will ask, what's the difference between CC and BCC? And that's highlighted in this box here. So let's go over CC first. CC stands for carbon copy. It is basically a holdover from an older technology. Now, I don't know how old you are, but you may or may not remember these things that we used a long time ago called typewriters. And basically you push the key and it makes a metal key strike a ink ribbon, and the ink ribbon would transfer the ink onto the white piece of paper that you roll into the roller of the typewriter. Well, you're only making one copy of that email if you're typing, or letter. It's not an email, obviously, it's a letter when you type it on a typewriter. But what if you wanted a copy of that letter? You have to retype this exact same letter. There was an easier way to do that. There was what we call a carbon copy sheet. It was basically a sheet that was all ink, and carbon, it was carbon ink, because carbon, of course, is very good to use as an ink. And so what you do is you'd have your white sheet of paper, your copy paper here. You'd put your carbon copy here, and then another white sheet of paper here. That would be the copy, the second copy that you wanted. So when you rolled that combination through your roller, all three sheets of paper, you type the key, it would strike it, and the force would make an impression on both sheets of paper. It only was really good for 2 sheets of paper. If you had 3 sheets of paper, the force of the key wouldn't make an image on the third piece. So anyway, that's interesting little bit of history. Many of you are probably wondering, what is he talking about? What's a typewriter? Okay, no worries, but it's just a holdover from a earlier technology that we use nowadays to say carbon copy. Basically, in an email, it means everyone can see who else is receiving the email. So in the CC line, you can see all the other recipients, the people who are receiving the email. Why would you do that? Well, if you're emailing other people who are directly impacted by the email, say you're sending out an email to all the project members, they're all working together on a project. So they probably already know everyone else. They know that everybody else has received that email, so that they know they don't have to explain any background information to the other people that they're working with, because they all received the email. Now BCC, how is that different? Now BCC is different because it stands for blind carbon copy, BCC. Basically blind. The people who are being sent the email, they don't see the other people's addresses. They cannot see those. They only see their own email address. So why would you use BCC? Well, people who are maybe involved in a non-direct manner. Maybe they're not actively working on a project, but they just want to be kept in the loop. What does that mean, kept in the loop? It's kind of like FYI, for your information. I know you're not directly involved in this project, but you are interested in the project and you told me that you want to be kept in the loop. You want to be kept up to date on the information regarding the ongoing process of this project or issue or whatever it is that you're writing about. Well, the use of BCC ensures privacy. It may also help prevent spam and the spread of online viruses by keeping email addresses private. Other people cannot see them, so those email addresses are not spread out throughout the internet. Okay, so that's BCC. Next, we have the subject line. And of course, when you write a subject line, you want to be specific and concise. Concise means use as few words as possible. Do not write full sentences. And do not use hi Brian or just meeting, because these are too vague. And it may be surprising, but sometimes I do receive emails from business colleagues that just say hi Brian in the subject line. And of course, if I want to go back in my inbox and find that email for future reference, it's going to be more difficult for me, to find that email, especially if I receive many emails from the same person. I want to know which email in particular I want to refer to, or maybe refresh my memory to get that information that was sent before. So try to write about 25 to 30 characters. Keep it limited to 25. Don't write more than 25 or 30 characters. Why? Well, the main reason for that is because most people will check their email on a cell phone, and 25, well, I've got a couple of messages, 25 to 30 characters is about the width of a typical screen for your cell phone. So it's easier for people when they check their email on their phone, they can see very easily what the subject is. It's not necessary to write a full sentence, just again, be concise, just the specific information, and use dates if appropriate. A couple of examples could be weekly staff meeting - September 9th, or information request - Imogen launch. Another good tip to keep in mind for subject lines are the use of commonly used acronyms to help the reader understand very quickly what your subject line is about, or if they need to pay a lot of attention to it. For example, you could use acronyms such as QQ, which means quick question. For example, let's say you're working on a contract with somebody and you want them to take a look at just part of the contract, not the whole contract. You just have a question about a certain detail of the contract or larger project or whatever it might be, and you only want the reader to answer a specific question. It's helpful to put QQ in your subject line to let the reader know that this isn't going to take a lot of time. It's just that you want them to look at something very quickly and give you a quick response. Another very common acronym is FYI. We've already covered this. Of course, this means for your information. If you're sending an email to somebody and you do not need them to take action, you just want to keep them in the loop or keep them updated, then you could put FYI in the subject line. Another one that you could use is STAT, S-T-A-T, or IMP, IMP. It means important. It's actually an abbreviation, not really an acronym. But what these signal to the reader is that an immediate response is needed, so that they should get back to you right away. So what are some examples of these acronyms? First, we have QQ, contract language, service terms. So like I said before, if you're working on a contract with somebody and you want them to take a look at the language that is used to describe the service terms in the contract and only in that detail, then you could put QQ, contract language, service terms. Another example with FYI, quarter 3 or third quarter sales projections. I don't need you to do any action. I would just like you to take a look at the sales projections because I want to keep you updated, but you are not required to do any action. The last example, STAT, conference hall reservations. Let's say that you're working with someone to host a symposium or some other event for your company, and you realize, hey, we have to reserve the conference hall immediately, like right away, today or tomorrow, to make sure that it will be available for our event. So STAT, conference hall reservations. We need to do that quickly. So these are three different examples. There are a lot of other types of acronyms like this. These are the most common ones, but different companies will use different acronyms, and as you work with that company or you work at that company, you will encounter those, and of course you will incorporate them into your own communications. Okay, moving on. After the subject line, when you begin the text of your email, you're going to start with a salutation. Now, we've seen a couple of examples of salutations that I gave you earlier in this lesson. Dear Mr. Lim or Dear Mr. George Lim with a colon. Oh, by the way, all of these are shown to you on page 5, so you can just turn to page 5 and follow along with the salutations and the valedictions. So the most formal salutation is using the full name with a colon, as I said before. Dear Mr. John Smith. That's the most formal way to begin your email. That's what you would use if you're writing again to a very important person in the company. If you're writing to your own CEO at your company, you might use this, or especially to a CEO of another company, or a high-ranking government official in another country, or even in your own country. But that's very formal. Of course, most people will just write Dear Mr. or Ms. and the family name, for example, Dear Ms. Smith. Now, please remember, for women, do not write Miss or Mrs. It is Ms. Because basically Miss, right? Miss means unmarried woman, agashi, right? And Mrs. is married woman, ajima. But in business, of course, there's no point in addressing someone as unmarried woman or married woman. We don't do that for men. It's always just Mr. Mr. doesn't mean married or unmarried. So why should we have that distinction for women? So of course, by now, of course, you probably already know this, but just to review, to make sure, use Ms. That is the professional title. So Dear Ms. Smith, comma, would be very common. If you do not know the person who is receiving your email, there are many choices. You could use Dear Sir or Madam with a colon, to whom it may concern with a colon. You don't have to use a colon, but these are very common salutations, and it's very common to use a colon with them. They're more formal. You don't know the person to whom you are writing. However, I would suggest that these two are a little old-fashioned, and I don't really recommend using them. Of course, you may see them kind of often, but they are a little old-fashioned and cliche. Cliche means overused. So I would recommend don't use them. We live in the age of the internet, okay? It's very easy to find people's names. If you're writing to the human resources director of a company, you can probably go to the website of that company and find out who the director of human resources is, and then use their name. If you can't, if it's not possible to do that, then at least address it to the person, the title of the person to whom you think the email will be received, or to whom you want the email to go to. For example, if you were writing to a company about a job or job information, you would write Dear Human Resources Director. You might even put in the name of the company, Dear Lucky Good Star Human Resources Director. Now, for almost all situations, though, you could use representative, because it doesn't matter if they're the CEO or a new hired temp at the company, they're all representatives of the company. So Dear Lucky Good Star Representative, that's kind of a generic catch-all salutation. What if you're writing an email to many people? Then you would probably use something like this. To all employees. You're the CEO of your company. You want to write an email to all of your employees. To all employees, and then use a colon. It's very common to use a colon for a mass email. So to all employees, or to all strategic team members. You could also write Dear Marketing Staff or Dear Sales Team. These are very appropriate for writing a mass email. Informal salutations. Now, in fact, most emails are informal. Probably 80 to 90% of emails are informal because you already know the person. Maybe you work closely with them. And a lot of emails are very quick communication between people, especially if you're just asking somebody about a quick question or a small bit of information that you need to know. So it's very appropriate to write Dear Paul. You could just write Paul or Hey Paul. The Hey Paul is more for friends, though. It's more of a friendly way to address somebody. If you're working with somebody, you're not really that close with them, probably Dear Paul would be good, or just Paul is fine. And I've noticed, of course, some people sometimes they don't even bother with the salutation. They just get right to the email. They just right to the body of the email. I don't like that. Maybe I'm a little old-fashioned, but different people, different styles. If you're writing to a group informally, you could write, hello everyone, or just, hi team. Now, let's talk about valediction. Valediction is how you say goodbye. Valediction also means farewell, goodbye. So what are some common valedictions? The most common valediction for emails is best regard. Now, you may have noticed in the email that we went over on page 2 that the salutation best regards R was capitalized. Technically, that is incorrect. Now, not a lot of people pay attention to this, and I'm not going to make a big deal out of it, but technically, the second word or third word in a valediction should not be capitalized, only the first word. So if you use best regards, only capitalize B, best. Here, next we have sincerely, sincere regards. Again, do not capitalize regards. It should be small r. Thank you, again, small u. Best or respectfully. Respectfully is a good one. A little story behind that. Usually I used to meet, before COVID-19, I used to meet a friend of mine for lunch every Saturday, and he had been in the Army in Korea for quite a while. He's still in Korea working as a contractor, and sometimes he brings his co-workers to lunch, and we have lunch together. I get to meet some other people, and usually these people are either in the military or they have a military background, and I asked them, well, hey guys, what do you usually use at the end of your email? How do you sign off? And they told me, well, in the military, of course, it's very important to show respect to a commanding officer. So it's standard. It's like everybody uses respectfully as far as their experience goes in their field. So they told me that respectfully is very common because you show respect to your commanding officer. So respectfully is a very common or normal ubiquitous type of valediction to use, especially in the military. But of course, this carries over to civilian life. It doesn't sound, if you use respectfully at the end of your email, you don't sound like you're from the military. People won't get that idea. So don't worry about that. But it is a very nice, a little bit formal way to end your email. And it's especially useful if you're writing to government officials in other countries, especially since the military and the government are very strongly connected as well. And if you're writing to somebody important, again, a VIP or a high government official, it would be very appropriate to use respectfully. That would be a good choice. For informal emails, you could, of course, write cheers. Cheers is the British ubiquitous term, right? It seems like British people use cheers for almost everything. They say hello, cheers. They say goodbye, cheers. They say thank you, cheers. You're drinking beer, cheers. Okay, so maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but cheers seems to be a very common British expression. And of course, it's very often that you could sign off on an informal email using cheers. If the person helped you, you could just use thanks. You could use keep in touch, that's possible. This is what I always use in my emails. When I'm writing to somebody with whom I'm working, I know them, it's not a formal email, I'll write take care. It just sounds friendly. Of course, you're concerned about the other person, and it shows a friendly concern for the other person. Take care. Now, of course, in English, we also borrow from other languages. You see this one here. What in the world is that? C-I-A-O. How do you pronounce that? Well, it's pronounced ciao, and it's Italian. So it's Italian, so probably people in Europe writing in English would probably use ciao kind of often. Adios is Spanish. In the United States, especially in the southwestern states, California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, it could be very common to sign off with adios. So again, English speakers do borrow from other languages quite often. For business, do not use these valedictions. Warmly. Warmly is a bit too friendly, a bit too personal to use for a business communication. I wouldn't recommend it. Of course, you wouldn't use love. That's way too personal. Peace or peace out. That's not appropriate for business situations. Try not to use slang or slang expressions. May God bless you. This is a religious reference. Avoid it. because again, especially in the Western cultures, religion is a personal affair. It's not something that you spread around, and people might feel uncomfortable if they receive an email and at the bottom it says, "May God bless you." It just doesn't strike the right tone. So just avoid any type of religious reference. Keep it professional, keep it business like, and avoid religious references. Now the last one here, TTFN, that is interesting. When I was looking up on the internet for common business valedictions, I did run across this type of valediction, and basically that's perhaps the younger generation, especially they're used to typing or texting, and they might use abbreviations or acronyms. TTFN means ta-ta for now. What is ta-ta? Ta-ta is a very informal way of saying bye-bye, bye-bye for now. Do not use that for business communication. I don't recommend that. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but maybe in 20 years people will be using that all the time. But for professional business emails, I don't recommend using those. And of course, try to avoid using these types of symbols in your email because these are not very professional. They're cute, yes, but they are not good for professional business emails, and especially for formal business emails. So avoid these types of cute expressions here or these types of cute symbols up here. Okay, well that about wraps up this lesson. This is kind of a long lesson. I didn't expect it to last so long for these two things, but what we did, of course, we went over a sample email and we corrected it, and we also took a look at it in terms of how to format your email. What should your professional business email look like? So I hope that this lesson was useful for you. We'll continue in this theme in the next lesson. We'll wrap up Unit 1, and I hope to see you there. So take it easy, everybody. Thank you for studying with me. See you in the next one. Ta-ta. No. Goodbye. Take care.